Supervisors meeting, recorded March 16, 2021.
Okay. It's 5 o'clock. We'll call the Portage County Board to order. Roll call.
There are 11 attending in person, 11 online, 3 excused. Supervisors Medine, Barry Jakowski, and Neville.
And Supervisor Barry Jakowski had called and said he was running late, but he was going to try and join us. So next item, the pledge of the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Invocation by Supervisor Martinson.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Okay, great. Past 12 months.
Now we lost you. Dan, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Is that better?
Ted? Yeah.
Okay. So as we meet tonight, I ask that we stay focused on the objectives that are common to all of us. Peace, prosperity, good health, and happiness for all the residents of Portage County, the state of Wisconsin, this nation, and the world. We are, all of us, in a privileged position that allows us a small amount of influence and the ability to make a difference in the lives of our fellow citizens. So tonight I ask that we honor our role in the community, respect each other and our individual and collective constituents, seek wisdom in our decision-making, and continue to pursue progress for our community. And I ask that we honor the essential and frontline workers who make it possible for us to carry on, and ask that we continue to respect their workplaces, their health, and the health of their families by continuing to take the necessary measures to keep them healthy and to do the work that is so vital to our community. Thank you.
Review and approval of the minutes of February 16th, 2021. Motion by Supervisor Dobek, seconded by Supervisor Gussel. Any corrections or changes? All those in favor with aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. You see Barry's here. Okay. Oh, and number 2. Correspondence, there's none. We're going to start off with a presentation tonight, Wisconsin Counties Association, Sarah Dietrich, Hasdorf, agendas and minutes for the county board and committee meetings. Can everybody at home see the screen showing up?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
All right, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
All right. I have to say this is the first time in a while I've actually presented to a group in person. So I'm actually pretty excited about that. We've been doing way too many Zoom meetings lately, talking to people via Zoom. I can't tell you how difficult it is to give presentations when you get absolutely no feedback from anybody in the room. So I have to say, as much as this isn't the most exciting presentation I've ever given in my life, it's an opportunity to come out and see some county board folks in person, and so I'm really excited for that opportunity. My name is Sarah Dietrich Hasdorf. I'm the Deputy Director of Government Affairs at the Wisconsin Counties Association. I've been working with the association now for about 29 and a half years. In September, I'll hit 30 years with the association. Sometimes I don't like to admit that. The older I get, the older it makes me appear. So, but I've had a real interest in county government for a long time. Over the years, I've really come to respect the work that county officials do. My primary job responsibilities right now are I'm a lobbyist on health and human services issues. But I've taken a great interest over the years in some of the county organizational issues, things about, like parliamentary procedure, agendas and minutes, these types of things as well. So when John Holcomer, who used to give all these presentations for us, decided to retire on us about just over a year ago now, I was tasked with taking over some of these duties for him. So, so this is a presentation, I will say, that is really a compilation of work by the County Clerks Association and their guidance document, stuff that we find in Robert's Rules of Order, stuff that we've heard over the years from our legal counsel, as well as some of our partners at the University of Wisconsin-Madison Division of Extension Local Government Education. They changed their name recently. It's now a really long name in which to say. But that's really the source of the information for tonight's presentation. A lot of times when we give this presentation, sometimes we like to couple it with a presentation on the open meetings law, simply because there are so many overlaps between the open meetings law and agendas and minutes. So you'll hear me tonight referencing the open meetings law quite a bit, as well as referencing Robert's Rules of Order. Although I will have to say we will talk a lot as well about why it is that even though you may have adopted Robert's Rules of Order as your procedural guidance and document as a county, why in some instances it won't apply. So to begin, again, as we talked about, let's talk a little bit about the sources from which our counties receive guidance with regard to minutes and agendas. And I'm sorry, I'm not controlling the clicker, so I'll do the best I can. And hopefully what's up, you should have the presentation though in front of you as well. So a lot of times when we talk about these presentations, we like to talk about the sources from which we receive our guidance with regard to agendas and minutes. And there's really three primary sources that we look to as counties when we want to make a determination as to what should be on our agendas, how should we structure them, and what should our minutes look like. First and foremost, we look to state statute. And counties, of course, must always make sure that we are in compliance with state law. And there are some items that are in Robert's Rules of Order that are in conflict with state statute. So we need to make sure that we can identify what those things are, recognize when those conflicts come up, and make sure that we avoid those conflicts and always follow state law, as in terms of ranking order, state law is at the top of the list. The second item that we tend to look at is our local rules. And when we talk about local rules, oftentimes they're referred to as your county board rules. Sometimes counties call their county board rules a handbook, whatever you call them. Most counties, if not all, adopt local rules as part of their organizations during their organizational meetings. And that is another place in which you would want to look to determine how it is your minutes and your agendas should be structured. And then finally, of course, there's Robert's Rules of Order, which tends to be the default for most, if not all, counties. So if the state statutes or if your local county board rules don't address an issue, then typically you would look to Robert's Rules of Order, and that would apply. Again, as I mentioned earlier, there are a number of instances in which Robert's Rules of Order may be in conflict with state statute. The other thing to keep in mind when looking at Robert's Rules of Order as well is the fact that Robert's Rules of Order, it was not written for governmental use at all. And so a lot of times the procedures that might be outlined in Robert's Rules of Order might not apply to meetings of local units of government. Again, some of that deals with the conflict in state statute or sometimes the conflict in your local rules. So even though you may take a look at Robert's rules and say, well, this is what Robert says, again, keep in mind, it wasn't designed for the work that you guys do. So let's start with agendas and talk a little bit about how agendas are created and what must be included on an agenda before we tackle the minutes. Really, the purpose of an agenda is to set the expectations for what will occur at a meeting. It provides advance notice to the members of the governmental body, to the public, and to the media with regard to what business will be addressed at a meeting, as well as the order in which the business will be considered. Now, the other thing that an agenda does is it tends to keep the body on task. If you don't have an agenda, if you don't adhere to your agenda and you don't follow the agenda, you'll find yourselves going off on tangents quite a bit. So an agenda really does serve a purpose of keeping the body on task. Now, all of that being said, you do have the option at a meeting to take the items out of order on your agenda. However, members of the public, the media, may be interested in an issue that you have listed later on in your agenda. So if your board meeting starts at 5 o'clock and, item number 11 has to do with a zoning petition that folks are interested in, maybe they don't come to the meeting at 5 o'clock because they took a look at your agenda and said, if I get there by 5:45, I should be there in plenty of time for that item to hear the discussion on that particular item. So if you move your agenda around, just keep in mind that the media or the public may not be there then to hear the issue that they wish to that they have an interest in. And so you want to make sure that you avoid backlash from the public or from the media if you do choose to change your agenda around during your meeting. The open meetings law does require that there is public notice of meetings, and that requires you to put out a meeting notice that has the time, date, place, and subject matter for the agenda. And 99% of the time, the agenda will serve as the meeting notice simply because it contains all of the items that are required to be provided as part of a public notice. So again, oftentimes you won't see a lot of separate public notices for a meeting. What you'll see is the agenda. Now, agendas do need to be, again, posted in compliance with the open meetings law. That means that 24 hours notice is required. Now, typically that is not a problem for counties. Most counties do post their agendas for their county board meetings or for their committees, well in advance of that 24-hour period. Now, there is an exception to that 24-hour rule for good cause. And the statute references, unless for good cause, such notice is impossible or impractical. The notice must be given ASAP and at least 2 hours in advance. Now, that being said, there is no definition of good cause in state statute. We also don't know from any sort of court opinions or any sort of attorney general opinion as to what might constitute good cause. So there's absolutely nothing out there to give us any sort of guidance as to what might meet that good cause requirement for a 2-hour notice instead of a 24-hour notice. But again, if there is any doubt whatsoever, you should adhere to the 24-hour rule. I can't tell you there would be, I think, a very rare instance in county government where you would post with 2 hours notice. And in all of my years, I am unaware of any county, that has done that. I have not heard of that. Typically, there's enough time to give that 24-hour notice. The other thing I should mention as well with regard to public notice, oftentimes counties or local units of government will create a listing of here are all the meetings of the county board for the year. Posting that does not meet the public notice requirement. You have to have a separate notice for each meeting. Now, one of the questions we get asked a lot at our office is who gets to set the meeting agenda? And according to Robert's Rules of Order, Robert says that it's the presiding officer or the designee who sets the agenda and notices the meeting. However, we cannot overlook the role that the county clerk plays in this particular area. 5923 of the state statutes does provide that the clerk creates the agenda for meetings under the direction of the county board chairperson or committee chairperson. And there are a lot of good reasons why you want to work with your county clerk with regard to the preparation of your agendas. Probably two of the biggest reasons is that you would make sure that you're complying with the open meetings law, as well as it will provide some consistency across all of your county meetings. So Robert's, this is also one of those areas where, you know, Robert's Rules of Order references the fact that in order for an agenda to become the official agenda for the meeting, it must be adopted at the outset of the meeting. That is language that is in Roberts that again cannot and does not apply to local units of government, because you again need to comply with the open meetings law. So your agenda needs to be posted again 24 hours ahead of time. You can't make changes to your agenda, you know, in terms of adding items once that agenda has been posted and once your meeting starts. And I'll talk a little bit about that more in just a minute. Again, with regard to who sets the agenda, counties have a lot of different ways in which they set the agenda. You know, Portage County may have a different agenda setting process than say Marathon County does or Wood County does, and that is perfectly fine. You know, we don't necessarily see or, you know, ask for uniformity amongst the counties and how they set their agenda, but there's one thing that we do encourage all counties to do. And what we encourage all counties to do is to have a written procedure in place with regard to how your agenda will get developed. This should be part of your organizational rules that you adopt every 2 years at the start of your session. Those rules should contain a really clear process delineating how items get put on the county board agenda, as well as how items get put on committee agendas. A clear process is really going to save you from headaches down the road when an individual supervisor wants to place an item on the agenda and you have a committee chair or a county board chair that doesn't necessarily agree with that particular agenda item and doesn't want to put it on. We have received a number of calls over the years from counties saying, the chair won't put my item on the agenda, what do I do? And we say, well, what is the procedure that your county board has in place? And, you know, that is the procedure that the county decided on. And so, you know, again, these procedures vary. I've seen many different ways, from anything goes to, you know, it has to, you know, there's other ways in which things get on agendas. So again, a clear procedure will make it very easy for you to determine whether or not something should or should not be placed on an agenda. Really, no matter, again, what approach a county takes, you should have rules. All the members should be aware and have an understanding of the procedure and know their rights and responsibilities for placing items on the agenda. Members can always request that an item can be placed on a county board agenda for a future meeting. However, a county board member does not have the right to demand that an item be placed on the agenda. Now, according to Robert's Rules of Order, a board could vote to place an item on the agenda. However, if it fails, then that item cannot be placed on the agenda. And based upon, you know, how counties do things, in most cases, in order to utilize that procedure in Roberts, you would need to suspend your rules in which to do that. And then that would take a 2/3 vote. And then that doesn't mean that that item is placed on the current agenda. It would have to be placed on a future agenda, again, due to open meetings law concerns. Now, sometimes for counties, they take a look at agenda setting and they treat committees a little differently than how they treat the placement of items on an agenda for the county board. Again, there's a lot of different ways that counties utilize to place items on a committee agenda. It can range from such things as leaving it to the discretion of the committee chair, to allowing the chair and the clerk of the committee to develop the agenda jointly. Sometimes it's the department heads that will put together an agenda because they know the items that need to be placed on the agenda or need to be considered by that particular committee, and they would work with the committee chair in which to set that agenda. Sometimes in some counties, they say anything that needs to go on the board agenda or on the committee agenda needs to run through the county board chair or needs to run through the county's executive committee. Sometimes at the end of a meeting, a county, there'll be a couple of minutes and folks will say, what should we put on our next agenda? And the committee will have some discussion about items that they would like to see taken up at future meetings. Again, these are all many different ways. There no way is necessarily a better route to go than another route. A lot of it just really kind of depends on the culture within your county and how and what works for your county. So the next slide I'm going to talk about, and we're going to get now into some of the more specifics of the elements and sequence of an agenda. What you see on the slide is what a sample agenda could potentially look like for a county board meeting. Now, that being said, if you were to put this agenda out that's on this particular slide, you would be in violation of the open meetings law. The reason for that is because the items that you're seeing on this agenda are items that are pretty general in nature. So they have a lot of generic titles, such as old business, new business, such other matters as allowed by law. These are all things that don't really provide the public with enough information to determine whether or not they know what is really going to be discussed at the meeting. So again, we recommend that as counties move forward with agenda setting, that you have a policy in place, likely within your organizational, your county board rules, that would list a structure for your agendas, which is more of what is on this slide, is more a structure. And then from there, you would go in and add the detail that you would need to add in order to be in compliance with the open meetings law. There are a number of counties, I don't know if you guys do it, but there are a number of counties that use a consent calendar. If you're going to use a consent calendar, make sure everything that you take up under that consent calendar is listed individually on the agenda. Now, again, back to this use of generic items on the agenda. The Attorney General has provided a lot of advice and guidance with regard to the use of generic agenda items. The Attorney General has said some things as it's insufficient standing alone as they identify no particular subjects at all. They lack in informational value. They fail to give reasonable notice of what will be discussed. He says that any notice has to reasonably apprise the public of the meeting's subject matter. So really, when you are taking a look at your agenda, one of the questions you should be asking yourself is whether or not a person who is interested in a specific subject would be aware upon reading the notice that the subject matter that they're interested in might be discussed at the meeting. So we're just going to flip through some of these agenda topics real quick. The first one, call to order. According to Robert's Rules of Order, no business can be conducted until a meeting is called to order. So that's typically the first item on every single agenda. Roll call, again with roll call, with small boards and committees, roll call isn't necessary as long as you just make a statement that a quorum is present and you're noticing that a quorum is present for the meeting, but your meeting minutes should reflect who is in attendance. Certification of compliance with the open meetings law. This is something that we see on a number of agendas. I don't think it was on your agenda today. It's something that is optional for counties to place on their agendas. Oftentimes counties will do it. They'll ask their county clerk, did you post this meeting in compliance with the open meetings law? And the county clerk says, yes, I did. There's really no need for that. It is optional, but if somebody does have that on their agenda, then we absolutely say, please do not vote on that item. Because if for some reason something was amiss, now the whole county board has indicated that they believe and they agree that the meeting was posted properly, and so you could be in violation of the open meetings law simply by voting on that particular item. So again, it's probably a good thing you don't have it on your agenda. I would say things that don't have to be on the agenda, don't put them on your agenda. Another thing we see on some agendas at the county level is approval of the agenda. Again, I didn't see that on your agenda, and that's a good thing. It's not really, again, that's a carryover from Robert's Rules of Order, which is why we see a lot of counties put it on there, because Robert says you should. But again, this is one of those instances where what Robert says doesn't necessarily apply to local governmental bodies. So if you do have that on your agenda, it just basically means that you're agreeing to the order of the items on the agenda. But again, no legal requirement that you adopt the agenda. It's not really an actionable item because you already gave notice to the public with regard to what was going to be on the agenda. One thing that you can do though, when you have under this particular provision of the agenda, is there's no requirement that you take up every item that is listed on your agenda. So if there's an item on your agenda that you have posted that you know is not going to come up that particular night for some reason or another, the information you were waiting for didn't come in yet, the report wasn't completed, you took a look at the item and you said, I don't think this is specific enough to meet the open meetings law requirements, whatever it may be, you certainly have the option to cancel a discussion or postpone it to a later date. And a lot of times that's the place where counties or local units of government will remove those items from the agenda. Citizen and public comments. There's absolutely no requirement in statute in which to, where you're required to allow the public to comment. We get this question a lot. We'll get folks, from county boards or the public calling us saying, why is there not public comment on the agenda? Because it's not required. It is something optional that I know most, if not all, county boards do. But we do recommend that if a county does put that particular provision on their agenda, that you should have a county board rule that specifies when you're going to do it, how it is you're going to do it, the length of time that members of the public are going to be provided the opportunity to speak. Is it 2 minutes? Is it 3 minutes? Is it 5 minutes? Are you going to let members of the public address any issue as part of the public comment period? Or are you going to limit public comment to only items that are on the particular agenda for the meeting in which the public is appearing to speak? We would say it's advisable if you are going to hold public comment to put this at the beginning of your agenda, simply because it takes the citizens out of the debate process. And you don't want board members to be debating members of the public. That being said, oftentimes too, we know that a lot of the work that gets done at the county level is done by the committees. And so, it might be more useful to have public comment period held during a committee meeting as opposed to having, public comment at the full county board meeting. So that's something counties may want to consider as well. Correspondence. That's another item that we see quite a bit on our county board agendas. There is guidance from the Attorney General on this. The Attorney General has indicated that if you are going to have correspondence on your agenda, that you need to list the topics and the subject matter. Otherwise, you would risk violating the open meetings law if you just list correspondence on your agenda without providing any additional detail. Reading and approval of the minutes. If the minutes are sent in advance, really approval of the minutes should take no more than a few seconds as part of your meeting. There is no need to read the minutes aloud during your meeting, especially if they have been sent out in advance. But what each county should have as part of its county board rules is a process or a procedure for how you're going to handle approval of the minutes. Some counties will take a motion to approve the minutes. According to Robert's Rules of Order, you can approve the minutes by unanimous consent. So again, it's that, we don't care how you do it. Just make sure that your county does it consistently and that, again, you lay out a process in which, as with regard to how it is, you are going to approve your minutes. Reports. If you are going to be receiving reports on your agenda, Again, to avoid any sort of conflicts with the open meetings law, you should list the subject matter of the report on the agenda. Oftentimes, you may also want to list who is giving the report as well. After you hear the report, you should not vote to accept or approve the report. All you need to do is say thank you to the presenter or whoever is giving the report and place that information on file. The reason you don't want to do that, accept reports, is because oftentimes reports will come with recommendations. And if you adopt the report, does that then mean that the county board approved all of the recommendations, say that came from your consultant on a particular item that you asked them to do a study on? So again, thank the presenter, place the report on file, don't take action on the report. Special orders. These are oftentimes items that were not completed at a prior meeting. They might be items that were postponed to a time certain, meaning the next meeting. Again, you can't just place special orders on your agenda. You need to state the topic of the special order on your agenda. Let's see, unfinished business. Oftentimes you'll see that on an agenda, unfinished business. Again, that's a very generic term that we don't necessarily recommend you place on your agenda unless you follow it up with the subject matter that is going to be taken up as part of that unfinished business. So for example, if there were items that were postponed or items that were referred to a committee from the county board, for example, under unfinished business, when those items come back to the full county board, you just can't say unfinished business and take it up. Again, you need to list what those particular items are. Every topic, every item that you're going to be discussing needs to be listed on your agenda. Again, a lot of this is just repeat about, don't use generic titles on your agenda. Be as specific as you can be with regard to what is included on your agenda. The same thing applies to new business, the same as old business. You don't necessarily have to use the words new business on your agenda, but if you do use the terms new business on your agenda, again, make sure that you that you list it all, each item separately. A lot of times you'll see on an agenda such other business as allowed by law under the open meetings law. Is there any other business such as allowed by law? Probably not, because if it wasn't listed on the agenda, you can't take it up. So we used to see that on a lot of agendas, and we're not certain what by law you can take up without violating the open meetings law. So again, those types of generic titles shouldn't be placed on your agenda. Setting the next meeting date. A lot of times you don't see that very often on a county board agenda because you have already set your meeting schedule for the next year or two. So you don't see that very often, but sometimes counties or committees may use that to have a discussion about some items that you might want to see on the next agenda. And then the last agenda item typically is always adjourn or adjournment. Again, a motion is not required to adjourn a meeting, although we do see quite a bit counties taking a motion and a second and voting to adjourn the meeting, and that's absolutely fine. But according to Robert's Rules of Order, the presiding officer can just declare the meeting adjourned. Some other quick thoughts on an agenda. Again, you're not required to follow any sort of sequence that is listed in Robert's Rules of Order. Oftentimes when you're setting your agenda, logic will tend to dictate which items should come first. Things that are more important, things that might take more time, might be those things that you might want to put early on in your agenda as opposed to later on in your agenda. Real quickly on closed sessions and agendas. Any contemplated closed session must be properly noted on your agenda. If the chief presiding officer of the governmental body is aware that a closed session is contemplated at the time that public notice is provided for the meeting, then the notice must contain the subject matter of the closed session. And again, notice for your closed session typically tends to be your agenda. When you do that, You must include the subject matter of the topic to be discussed in closed session, as well as the specific statutory exemption that you are going into closed session under. You just can't say, we're going into closed session under section 19.85 of the statutes. Instead, if you're going into closed session, you need to specify you're going into closed session, the purpose for the closed session, and which of the 13 statutory exemptions your request or your need to go into closed session fall under. You know, sometimes it gets a little tricky, but you need to identify which of those specific statutory exemptions apply with regard to your closed session. So the other thing you need to do on your agenda when you go into closed session is to note whether or not your county board is going to come back into open session or not. That's important for members of the public to know, because if there's a member of the public, again, that's interested in watching your full county board meeting, you know, you don't want to waste their time and have them sit here all day for the body never to come back into full session after closed session. But if you intend to come back into session following your closed session, you need to let the public know ahead of time what your intention is. So that is it with regard to the agendas. Now let's talk a little bit about meeting minutes. So the purpose of meeting minutes is to serve as the official record of the proceedings of the governing body. It is an accurate record that shows that the meeting was held, and it captures the substance of the official action taken by the body. Now, I'm going to talk about, you're going to hear me talk about substance a couple of times and use that term. And in a couple of slides, there's an actual statutory definition with regard to substance. And so those are the things that you would be required to have as part of your minutes. What minutes are not, and we hear this a lot, they are not meant to be a transcript of the meeting. There are a number of reasons why you don't want your minutes to be a transcript of your meeting, and I'll talk about those in a little bit as well. So legally, governmental bodies are required to record the substance of the proceedings. With Stat 1983 sub 3 states that the motions and roll call votes of each meeting of a governmental body shall be recorded, preserved, and open to the public. The Attorney General has provided a lot of guidance with regard to what it is should be recorded as part of a meeting. The AG will tell you that the open meetings law requires a governmental body to create and preserve a record of all motions and roll call votes at its meetings. That applies to both open and closed sessions. And in order to do so, written minutes are the most common method in which to comply with that requirement. The statute does not indicate how detailed the record of motion and vote should be. But again, I think, when we get to that definition of substance, you'll see a little bit more about what it is that you'll want to contain within your minutes. But again, according to the open meetings or the, open meetings law, there's talk about, in public records law, there's talk about motions, roll call votes, need to be recorded and preserved. You'll notice nowhere in statute does it say every single word that is spoken at a meeting needs to be, recorded as part of that meeting. I should mention as well that there are things in Robert's Rules of Order that talk about how it is you should take minutes. But again, sometimes this is one of those instances too, where sometimes Roberts doesn't necessarily mesh well with the open meetings and public records law. And I'll point that out in a few places as well. So we talked about substance a couple of times. So now let's talk about what is substance. Now, the definition of substance is found in chapter 985 of the statutes. So it's not even in the parts of the statutes that talk about the public records laws, or I shouldn't say about the open meetings law, any of that. It's found in 985-01 sub 6 of the statutes. In substance is an intelligible abstract or synopsis of the essential elements of the official action taken by a local governing body, including the subject matter of a motion, the persons making and seconding the motion, and the roll call votes on the motion. So again, substance is a abstract or synopsis. They want to know the official action that was taken, the subject matter of a motion, who made and seconded the motion, and the roll call votes. You notice that's all it says. You know, this is one of those instances where counties do need to deviate from what's in Robert's rules. If you read Robert's rules, it says that you only need to record the maker of a motion. But because the statute says we're required to record the maker and second of the motion, we need to make sure we do that in the minutes. But again, sometimes folks will call and say, but Robert says this. You have to say yes, and we know that's what Robert says. Unfortunately, the state statute says something different. And in terms of hierarchy, state statute wins out every time. So Robert's Rules of Order, though, is a place that we do go to look to determine what is included and what should be included in minutes. Roberts talks about including in the minutes the kind of meeting that is being held. That means, is it a special meeting? Is it a regular meeting? Is it an adjourned meeting? Is it an adjourned special meeting? Roberts also talks about in the minutes listing the name of the organization, the date, time, and place that the meeting was held, the name of the presiding officer and the secretary or their substitutes, members present, and establishment of a quorum, action on the minutes of the previous meeting, the exact wording of each motion, the name of the maker. Again, Roberts doesn't state the second, but state statute requires that we list who seconded the motion. Roberts also says you need to record whether the motion passed or failed. Roberts also discusses including in the minutes points of order and appeals for reports, the name of the committee and the reporting member, as well as the hour of adjournment. According to Robert's Rules of Order, they do say that not only is it not necessary to summarize matters discussed at the meeting in the minutes of that meeting, Roberts declares and states that it is improper to do so. Roberts also, talks about the fact that, the secretaries tend to make unneeded work for themselves by putting far more into the minutes than is required or appropriate. They say that the most frequent mistakes made in minute taking are trying to summarize reports that are offered. They try to record arguments that are made in debate. And then they also talk about including all of the amendments and other secondary motions. That one, to me, that's a little more questionable. But the first two things that they talk about, summarizing reports, arguments in debate, are things that they, again, very, very clearly in Roberts specify do not belong as part of the minutes. Roberts also lists what not to include in the minutes. Robert's Rules of Order talks about things such as an opinion or interpretation of the secretary, judgmental phrases such as, members listen to a lengthy report, or, members express total confidence in the sheriff, or, things like that. They also say you should not include discussion as part of the minutes. They also reference motions that were withdrawn. Now that one, there are different thoughts on whether or not motions that are withdrawn should be included in the minutes or not. Once a motion is made and seconded, it belongs to the body. And therefore, technically, according to Roberts, the maker of the motion at that point in time can no longer withdraw the motion. The motion then needs to be, typically by unanimous consent, you just take care of it that way, which is why some folks think that it might make some sense if a motion does belong to the body at that point. If it's withdrawn, some of that should be reflected in the minutes. With regard to detailed reports, Roberts again says don't include detailed reports in the minutes. They say you might want to attach reports to the minutes or reference that these reports were placed on file. The other thing we hear quite a bit, I'm sure we've all been to meetings where somebody has stood up and made a very impassioned speech, and then they say, and I want that recorded in the minutes. Do you have to record what they said in the minutes just because at the end of their big impassioned speech, they said, I want my remarks recorded in the minutes? No, you are under no obligation to do so. Again, motions should really focus on what the body did, not what was said. So your minutes will contain a lot of action words. This was announced. This was ordered. It was reported. We discussed this topic. Here's the decision that was made. Really, again, we can't stress enough that the minutes are really a record of what was done, not what was said. And there are some good reasons for that. If you want to talk about financial reasons for that, you need to publish your minutes, right? So if you're going to write a recitation of what everybody said, that's going to take up a lot of inches in the newspaper and going to cost you a lot of money. But second, also, that in addition to that, you're really minimizing your legal risk by not, having your minutes serve as a transcript. It can be used as ammunition in a lawsuit. As they say, anything you say can and will be used against you. If somebody said something in the minutes that wasn't, and it was treated as a transcript and it wasn't stated exactly right, that could be a legal liability to you at some point in the future. The other reason you don't want to talk about, you don't want to treat the meeting as a transcript is because you want to ensure that the minute taker is really showing neutrality or impartiality. And if they were to write everything down, they're not remembering word for word what somebody says. They're writing down what they think they heard. And sometimes what they think they heard could be skewed a bit based upon personal belief or, what have you. And so what gets written down might not be exactly correct. And so you want to make sure that whatever in your minutes is really, a neutral or an impartial, recording of what happened during the meeting. Now, with regard to reports and announcements, we talked about that earlier. In your minutes, you're just going to record that the body received the report, who gave the report, and the subject matter. Again, written reports can be placed on file. And again, we recommend against voting to accept or approve any reports. Recommendations for recording formal decisions. If a decision was made by unanimous consent, the minutes should reflect that the motion was adopted by unanimous consent. If a vote was taken on a particular item included on the agenda, you should show in the minutes what the vote count was. It was 5-2. If a roll call vote was taken, the minutes should reflect how everybody voted, during the roll call vote. If there was a voice vote, then you would indicate the outcome and that a voice vote was taken. So you might say, motion carried by voice vote. So a lot of times they will ask people in the minutes to avoid using the word unanimous, especially on a voice vote, simply because you do not know for sure whether or not every single person in the room voted or not. Somebody may not have said anything when a voice vote was taken. And so you can't guarantee that it was a unanimous vote. So they do recommend just better to say no negatives as opposed to saying, something like the vote was unanimous. Let's see. Again, one thing on this next slide, the first two bullet points I think are pretty redundant. I think we've talked about those points already, but it's this third bullet point. The minute taker must make sure to get the wording down before the vote is taken. Sometimes it's hard when you are the person taking the notes or taking the minutes of a meeting, but it is absolutely appropriate for the minute taker to interject and make sure that they have the wording of the motion clear before the vote was taken. I know we've all been in meetings before where we've seen situations where somebody talks, during debate, and then somebody will say, so moved. And then somebody else will say, second. And then somebody else will say, yeah, but I think the truck we buy should be red instead of blue. And then they vote. Now, what did they actually do? What color was the truck that they voted on? Do we know for sure what it was because somebody just used the term so moved? And so again, if we were talking parliamentary procedure, we tell you not to say so moved. We tell you to actually state the motion, and stating the motion makes it much, much easier for the minute taker to get down what it is that the body's actual true intent is, and then they can read that back, and it will be clear to everybody what it is that they are voting on. Approval of the minutes is done at the subsequent meeting of the body. Roberts talks about how minutes should be signed by the secretary, and they could also be signed by the presiding officer as well. Again, a lot of times you'll see minutes stating, respectfully submitted by. That's, kind of old-fashioned language. That's nice and formal and proper, but they say you don't have to do that anymore when taking minutes. Correcting minutes. Now you'll see two different slides on this. One is for correcting minutes that were not previously approved, and one is for correcting minutes that were previously approved. If minutes have not been previously approved, it is certainly, I would say at the author has discretion to make corrections to the minutes that are non-substantive in nature. They spelled a word wrong. They spelled somebody's name wrong, and they noticed it after they sent the minutes out. They can go back and make those corrections as long as they resubmit the minutes back to you before you vote on approving those minutes. Any corrections that are made to the draft minutes at the meeting at which they are approved are made in the text of the minutes that are being approved. The minutes of the meeting at which the corrections are made should just merely indicate that the minutes were approved as corrected without specifying what those corrections are. Now that's a little bit different than when you are going to be approving minutes that were previously approved. I don't think that happens, or correcting minutes that were previously approved. I don't think it happens very often where you go back to an old set of minutes and need to correct them, but sometimes that happens. And so there's a process in place where, according to Roberts, you would probably have to make a motion to amend something previously adopted. That might take a 2/3 vote unless the body agrees to do it by unanimous consent, at which point you'd follow this process where the minutes of meeting B should show what the corrections were ordered in the minutes of meeting A, and then the original minutes of meeting A should be corrected so that the error remains apparent. You should retain the original version in the minute book, and corrections can be made at any time. And again, the information from this slide comes from the county clerk's agenda and minutes handbook. So minutes of closed session. They are advisable only in rare occasions, but they are necessary if official action was taken in closed session. You should indicate in open session, in the minutes of the open session, that the presiding officer made an announcement in open session, the subject matter and the specific exemption that allows you to go into closed session. So again, if you're going into closed session tonight, the minutes from today's meeting would specify that the chair indicated that the body will be going into closed session and the statutory reason why it is that you'd be going into closed session. In addition, the minutes also have to reflect the motion to convene into closed session, and the vote to go into closed session should be a roll call vote, and it must be recorded. And if we were talking about, open meetings laws and things like that, we'd be telling you the reason for that is simply because you can object to going into closed session if you believe that the body in the purpose of going into closed session does not meet the statutory requirement. And if you vote against going into closed session, it protects you from liability and from being charged with a violation of the open meetings law. So that's the reason why in the minutes going into closed session, it needs to be clear as to who voted to go into closed session and who voted against the closed session. If you take minutes of the closed session, those minutes would be taken separately from the minutes of your open session. And the motion to adjourn the closed session also needs to be recorded. It is important, likely when you want to go into closed session, you would want to read word for word the reason that you're going into closed session right off of the agenda so that the clerk is able to record that. So minutes of closed sessions, again, motions and votes must be recorded. Written summary of the discussion is not advisable in closed session. Again, there is a reason you went into closed session, so you probably don't want the discussion to be recorded somewhere. It's also a good time to remind you, if you're taking personal notes in a closed session, don't take them and throw them into the trash can right outside the closed session room. Somebody may go in there looking for notes, and then all of a sudden, you know, folks know what happened in that closed session, and there could be consequences for that. Minutes of quasi judicial bodies. These are, you know, really your such things as your Board of Adjustment, your permits, an appeal of an employee grievance, for example, where you're going to make a decision based on evidence. Your minutes should reflect the basis for that decision. Again, in terms of other considerations with regard to the minutes, minute takers may interrupt if necessary to get the exact wording of the motion, or in the event that they believe that for some reason the open meetings law is being violated. Then it would be, you know, incumbent upon the clerk or the minute taker, most times it's your county clerk or somebody from their office, that is going to step in and say, wait a minute, I don't think we should take this up, this wasn't noticed properly, or I didn't quite get the motion, can we repeat that again? Again, another thing that should be recorded in the minutes is the arrival and departure of members during the meeting. I think the last thing I have to talk about is audio recording of meetings. There are 3 different slides related to that. The gist of all of this is that the county clerk or your committee secretary may utilize an audio recording device to capture the discussion and actions and contents of a meeting for the sole purpose of utilizing the record to refresh the recollections when later drafting the official minutes of the recorded meeting. Provided that this recording is used solely for the aforementioned purpose, provided that it is maintained solely by the county clerk or committee secretary between the time of the recording is made and the time that the official minutes are adopted by the board or the committee, such recording does constitute a note under Wisconsin's public records law and therefore does not constitute an official county record. Now, because the recording does not constitute an official county record under the public records law, the county clerk is authorized to delete, discard, or otherwise destroy the recording upon the county boards or committees' ratification of the official minutes that were drafted by the county clerk or committee secretary in relation to such recording. And again, because such recording does not constitute an official county record under the public records law, such recording is not subject to disclosure under the public records law. Now, in order to do this, though, the county must have a written policy in place that allows the county clerk or the committee secretary to destroy the audio recording once the minutes are approved. Now, if that audio recording, though, is shared with anybody else, if the county board member says, or a member of the public says, I want to listen to that recording, the minute that recording is shared with somebody else other than the clerk or the recording secretary, that recording at that point does become a public record and open to inspection. So, last slide, role of the county clerk, because we don't want, the county clerk plays a very, very significant role with regard to the agenda in the minutes. So we highly recommend folks work very closely with their county clerk. Again, working with the county clerk will ensure that you guys are most likely going to stay in compliance with the open meetings law and with the public records law. 2013 Wisconsin Act 373 really clarified and solidified that particular role for the county clerk in statute. So again, I can't say enough about how the county clerk can save you guys to make sure you're not making any mistakes with regard to agendas or minutes. So with that, that is the end of the formal presentation. Mr. Chair, I don't know if we have time for questions or how did you like to proceed?
Yeah, we'll take a few questions if there are some. Supervisor Barry Jakowski.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for your presentation. Just a couple of quick questions. You said that if a recording is shared with anyone else, it becomes public record. Of course, if I'm correct, our meetings are open and viewed on public television or closed circuit TV. Is that correct, Mr. Chair?
Our county board meetings are, yes.
So that automatically, that recording is open to public records laws and.
Well, it depends on who controls and who owns those recordings. Is it the county that is recording and publishing the meeting? Is it a separate television station? Is it the city channel that's operated by the city? At which point the county, that's not a record, that belongs to the public. I mean, to the county. So therefore, the county doesn't have control over that particular record.
And we are recorded by the city,
Okay,
so it's not our record.
so we're okay with that.
Yep.
Secondly, you talk about minutes not supposing to be verbatim of conversations that go on. 99% of the time, it is a staff member that takes committee or that takes minutes, especially at the committee level. Here, of course, at the county board level, it is normally the county clerk. At times, we have either staff members at the committee level taking minutes, and at times, they're taking verbatim minutes and publishing those as minutes if they feel, and again, I'm trying to be careful as to what I say here. If they're not in agreement as to the way the committee or a certain member of the committee voices their opinion, they will publish those as verbatim if they feel it will either sway the public in their line of thinking. How do we stop that from happening?
I think the county could have a process in place with regard to, what your minutes would look like. You could certainly, as part of that process, outline, what the definition of substance is and what is required by statute to be included in the minutes. You could talk about what Robert's Rules of Order says with regard to the minutes. Again, the county board has to approve the minutes. So I would suggest highly working with your corporation counsel to determine, whether or not you can use a corrections process or some other process in which to, adopt the official minutes that are, that are more in line with what Roberts or the statutes would say they should look like. But again, I would work with your corporation counsel on that.
Thank you.
Supervisor Splinter.
I just want to revisit that one area where you said if the general public comes to a meeting and someone puts together, say, a 3-page type report he wants to give about a subject, and then he wants to submit it. Now, what you're saying is that we don't have to accept it or anything else, but from my point of view, half of this is representative and half of this is the public. And if someone comes in with something they want to say, and most of the time, it takes a lot of guts to do that. If you're not used to it on a regular basis, keeping it in line and then submitting it later. But if he reads it as to Al Haga from whatever, can he submit that as a correspondence, just to document what exactly he said?
I mean,
Because it seems to me just blowing off the public and saying, we don't have to be we don't have to. It sounds like there should be another way to get around that.
sure. I mean, I don't think you want every member of the public coming to a board meeting and reading 3 pages of text. You would never get to the items on your agenda if, public comment went on for 2 hours. That being said, there's absolutely nothing that prevents members of the public from sending correspondence individually to members of the county board, sending it to the county clerk and requesting that the county clerk share the information with members of the county board. And in fact, during this COVID pandemic, there was a time where many counties suspended their rules and didn't allow for in-person public comment for safety reasons. But during those times, they encouraged members of the public to send their correspondence to the county clerk or to email individual members of the county board with their thoughts. And so, just because there's not an unlimited time that is, allotted to the public to speak during a live county board meeting, that doesn't mean that there are not other means in which the public can provide its thoughts to the county.
And I'll give you an example. Citizen Corey Laddick did that recently with the COVID vaccinations, where he had sent it to the clerk and asked it to be forwarded on to the supervisors. So it does get used occasionally. Anybody else?
We're not ignoring people.
No.
That's the main thing I wanted to get.
Anybody else have any comments, questions? Supervisor Gussel?
Just a quick question. When is a meeting notice of posting, when can it be removed from the posting site?
I would say following the meeting. I don't think it would, if you post a meeting and then you take it down prior to the meeting occurring, I would think that would raise some questions with the open meetings law, because there's a section of the open meetings law that basically says you should always err on the side of the public having, access to the most, to the information that is available. That is not at all the exact wording of it. So I would think in order to meet that requirement of the open meetings law, I think some questions would be raised if you posted a meeting and then were to take it down a day before the meeting occurred.
No, I'm not talking about before, after the meeting takes place.
After the meeting takes place, at that point, I don't think there's anything wrong with after a meeting takes place with removing the public notice.
I think you can take it down
Especially-
as soon as the meeting is done.
Yeah, public notice, before technology, public notice happened by somebody pinning something up on a bulletin board. Typically then after the meeting was done, you'd go and you'd remove that notice from the meeting. And the same type of, thing would apply, with electronic means as well. Now, that being said, a lot of counties now use, various, electronic systems where the agendas and minutes are posted, in perpetuity, on the internet. But, to answer your question more specifically, I would assume that, as soon as the meeting's done, it would be appropriate to no longer have that meeting agenda posted.
So you're saying as soon as the meeting's over, the posting can be taken down?
Yeah, I have not seen anywhere, now I'm not a lawyer, so I should be careful here, but I have not seen anything in any, open meetings guidance that I've read from the Attorney General that says the meeting needs to stay posted, outside the courthouse door for, 72 hours following the meeting. I have never seen anything like that.
I would think the whole purpose of it is to inform the public and everyone that it's going to happen. Once it's happened, there's no purpose for it anymore.
Right.
So, anybody else have any questions, comments? Supervisor Andy,
Just a question, because we do represent.
could you put your mic over in front of you for the folks at home? Thank you, sir.
No problem. We represent a lot of people and we get elected. And yet, from what I read here, there is very little input as to how the people get into the meeting in order to discuss their concerns. So when you talk about the agenda item, what's wrong with saying something like, address the board on a non-agenda item, knowing full well that no action can be taken until the next board meeting?
Again, I didn't say that couldn't happen. What I suggest is that a county have a process in place for determining what types of items they'd like to hear from the public from at their meeting. A county can certainly say the public can talk about any item. Some counties say, because we have such robust meeting agendas, we just want to keep the public comments to those items that are included on the meeting notice. Again, it's up to each individual county to adopt its own set of procedural rules to determine how it is you want that to happen. And every county does it differently
I don't
again.
see anything wrong with including that into the agenda.
Well, you wouldn't necessarily put it on your agenda. You would want to adopt it as part of your county board rules at the time you make the decision about whether or not you're going to allow public comment to occur at your meeting.
Thank you.
I'm just looking for some clarification on this question so that if it comes up later, you were talking about non-agenda items.
Correct.
So and Corp Counsel, myself, the county clerk, we have a lot of discussion on a lot of these details and get into a lot of different things. And part of that, I get a little worried about open meetings and because of the simple fact that it's like, what are you going to talk about? Because it's not disclosed. And we just sat and listened through a lot of presentation where it talked about being specific on what we're talking about. So if something comes up and there's a little bit of debate, someone else wasn't afforded the opportunity to come there to speak either for or against it at the same time. So that I just caution that we be real cautious with that. And I don't know if you have anything else, Sarah.
The other thing I would say about that is it would take real discipline on the part of the board members to not respond to a member of the public if they're talking about an item that's not on the agenda.
It's debate.
Because then you would be in violation of the open meetings law because a member of the board, you'd be talking about something that is a non-agenda item.
That wasn't posted.
That's why we have you there.
Yeah.
So that's.
So there is
Because that's the chairman's responsibility to make the discipline.
Right.
But the
Yeah.
public has a right to request something to be placed on the agenda and to explain why.
well, again,
That's a future agenda. That would
Yeah,
fall under
again, I
future
mean,
agenda item.
yeah, again, though, keep in mind, there is no requirement by law that you even have a public comment period to begin with. So when you say the public has a right to, correspond with their board members, but there is not a right inherent in the statute that says you have to have a public comment period during your county board meeting. Most counties do it, but again, just to reiterate, that's not a statutory requirement.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Barry Jakowski.
One of the things that anybody who has attended a meeting that I chair, I always like to give the public time to comment. And I'm pretty loose with that, whether, if yes, we have, 30 people show up, then I try to limit it to, a 3-minute conversation or them making their point known. But as long as it's an agenda item, you feel that that's okay to let the public comment, correct? Because I think as we all sit here, we are elected by the public and feel that we are obligated to let those people speak if they would like.
Yeah. My point is if a county is going to allow for public comment to occur at either a committee meeting or at the county board meeting, you should have a procedure in place as part of your organizational rules as to how that public comment period is going to work.
And that, I think, the chair and the powers that be have done very well by the county here, so.
And again, we talk about policy and we've looked at a lot of this over and over. In this particular position as chair, we talk about a lot of things in the way it's laid out. Members of the public who wish to address the county board on specific agenda items must register their requests at this time with such comments as reasonable control of committee chair. So we've got 32 committees, we've got 32 chairs. So, it's not just the county board chair, but it's all the other chairs that are out there as well. So there's nobody else that has any questions. I'd like to thank Sarah. I had asked Sarah to come down here to speak to this. It's been a while since we've had a refresher. Some of you, if not all of you, I hope learned at least one thing or found something different, if not several things to think about. And I'm sure we'll have some discussions in the future. But I thought it was very educational and I appreciate it. So thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much.
And the folks that are at home, we've got extra copies. If anybody wants a printed copy, we'll have it in the county clerk's office. And if you'd like, we can either mail it out in the next packet if you would like something. Please contact Lee or Kayla to ask for that, and we'll get you a copy as well if you'd like something for your own record and a hard copy. Next item, Health and Human Service Director and County Executive COVID-19 update.
Good evening. Good to see you all again. So where we're at, just with our numbers update, we continue to do testing. Our testing now has gone down to 2 days a week at the ADRC. Mondays from 9 to 1 with the support of the Wisconsin National Guard or WING. And then Thursdays, we do that testing on our own. And that is from 1 to 5. Our testing numbers continue to go down. Over the last 3 days of testing, which included 1 full day, we only tested 44 people. And our positivity rate is now less than 5% out of that testing. Where our numbers stand today is, since the start of the pandemic, we've had 6,521 positive cases. Our 7-day average for confirmed PCR tests is down to 2.29 positive tests a day. But we've had 26,581 negative tests since the start of the pandemic. We've had 287 people hospitalized since the start of the pandemic. And we've had 64 fatalities since the start of the pandemic, but the good news is that we have not had a fatality registered in the county since the 19th of February. So slightly after the last time I was here, we haven't had any additional fatalities. So some of the changes that we've been dealing with that you've all heard about certainly has to do with, and things change every day, trust me, and that the CDC has announced their recommendation that for individuals that are fully vaccinated, and that would be 2 weeks past your last vaccination. So if you're a 2-dose series, it'd be after the second one. If you get a shot, that's a 1-dose series, 2 weeks after that. That now you have immunity. It used to be 90 days. Now now they say that immunity is indefinite. What that immunity means, though, is that if you were exposed to a positive case after you get to that fully immunized status, you would not be required to go into quarantine. As long as you remain asymptomatic. If you develop symptoms after an exposure, you'd have to go into quarantine or be tested, because what we're worried about is the variants that are out there. So that is the big change since the last time I was here. As far as our vaccination numbers go with public health, and I know Chris is going to talk a little bit about this as well, but at public health, we have given out 1,606 initial doses. We have given out 659 second doses. So we've had 659 people complete their vaccination series at public health for a total of 2,265 doses. What we're looking for, again, is the state has said we are supposed to do 14% of the vaccinations in the county. There's approximately 59,000 people eligible. Because again, we can't count kids just yet. So our goal is just about 10,000 shots. But that would be to get the full, to get everyone who's eligible. The hope is that we'll get 80% of that by the time we're all done. I've talked a lot about in the past about the number of the real key to this is the amount of vaccine that we get, and that has gone consistently up. On the first week in March, we received 498 first doses of the vaccine. And the second week of March, we received 342 first doses. And this week, we received 462 first doses of the vaccine. So we continue to vaccinate. And I know Chris is going to talk more about the county numbers, but we continue to vaccinate more and more people every week here in the county, which is a good thing. We look forward to that. And, our hope here is that we will continue to go and offer the vaccination clinics. We are offering clinics on Saturday. We have now gone to an electronic sign up at Public Health. So before you used to just kind of say, yes, I want a shot, we'd call you back. Now you actually go online and you can register for the time and date of when you get your shot. Lots of information in regards to who's eligible for shots. That changes every day. We were told, we talked about 1A, 1B, 1C. They've kind of got rid of that. Now they just talk about eligible groups. And then the next eligible group was going to be individuals from 16 to 64 with some type of health condition. They were to become eligible on the 29th of March. The governor announced today they're eligible on the 22nd of March. So that throws a mix into things, certainly for all the vaccinators here in the county. But again, it's all dependent on the amount of vaccine that we get. So we'll continue to work with everyone in the community in regards to this, and we look forward to hopefully that it won't be. I think it's going to be sooner than later that you're going to see that it's just going to be opened up to anyone who's eligible to sign up to get a shot. When that happens, I think people have to understand that, again, due to the amount of vaccine that we get, there might be that 2-3 week delay in order for somebody to get vaccinated, but to move that forward. So any questions for me before Chris?
Supervisor Splinter.
Quick question. Is the end of the fatalities primarily due to the over 65 group being vaccinated? I don't know of anybody over 65 in different social groups that hasn't had at least the opportunity to get a shot in our county, which is great. I'm getting my second one on Thursday. But I talked to different people that are over 65, and it's well, whatever you guys did, it was well done, because I mean, different groups that I'm with, they've all had, there's a few people that just won't get the shot at all. I can't help them. I don't know. I wouldn't play around with death. No, so, but anyway, but in that 54 group of fatalities, how do you have an age group of what that consisted of? Was that over 65 with
The vast majority were over the age of
That's right.
65, but there were some that were, I know of 2 for sure that were in their 40s.
So by getting the vaccine out to the over 65, we put a finger in the dike of the fatalities, which is great. I mean, if you did nothing but do that, people like to hear that there's no more fatalities, at least hopefully, cross your fingers.
That was mandated by the state,
Yes.
the first go around, so.
Yeah, well, after the medical providers, then yes, that was the second, I think.
Yep.
And that's a really good segue to what I think Executive Holman wants to talk about, because I think that at our last meeting, we talked a lot about where the county was at, and we had some public comment about how far behind we were, and I think that's changed quite nicely. So I'll turn it over to Executive Holman.
Oh, thank you. And you're right about the death rates, because, it affected different age brackets quite differently. But as you increased up in age, some folks, like if you're in the 80s, the odds of, severe symptoms and possible death, was like 1 in 4. So that's where you saw that nationwide. That was a huge impact on that group of people. But yeah, as Ray said, since the last meeting, I've had the ability to reach out and communicate with the Deputy Secretary at DHS a couple of times, ask some questions, and kind of take some things that I've been working with public health on to kind of see what their opinions were on that. And then also to kind of keep tabs on the county, in a sense that we have 7 vaccinators in the county. It's not a ton of vaccinators, but we do have the hospitals, so that's helpful. But the point being that just trying to, we don't direct the effort of other vaccinators, but we coordinate with them very closely. So we talk to each other quite a bit, and as we see vaccine supply increase, I think we'll be able to have more opportunities where we can work together more often on some of the larger clinics that hopefully we can pull off, and we have the planning in place for. So for those at home, I emailed an electronic version of these notes here. I handed out a paper copy as well. There's a few more extra copies in the back if people are curious, but I just want to run through it real quickly, just to kind of give you a sense of how the picture has changed in the last month. Ray already mentioned that we've been able to get more vaccine doses at the Division of Public Health, which is good. I think that part of that was DHS reallocating certain doses to different counties that were maybe falling a little bit behind, so they're catching things back up. In general, Wisconsin, as of today, has administered more than 2 million doses statewide. So you see there at the top, 20.4% of the population has received their first dose. And anytime you see a first dose, know that the second one is guaranteed. So those first doses are just waiting to happen based on whenever that individual's appointment is. Similarly, towards the bottom of that first part, 66.2% of people over 65 or older have received their first dose. So roughly 2/3 of the population statewide, which is, to your point earlier, a very good start, and the intention of what we started out with via DHS and the hospital, healthcare personnel, things like that. We got a lot of press as a state early on in this, is that we were lagging behind others. Some of that was information compiling and information flow and getting accurate data. But currently we're sitting at 3rd place in the United States for percentage of doses administered. Also first among upper Midwest states, or 13th in the US for total administered doses per 100,000 population. So overall, the state's been able to pick up a lot of steam, and that's been reflected locally as well. In the table, you'll see I just listed the percentages of the population with 1 dose, percentage of population completed the series, and then same deal with the 65 and older on the second 2 columns. And in the brackets are the raw data numbers next to the percentages. And it's especially important early on to see both of those numbers, because the percentage can kind of skew what you're looking at if you're not looking at what's the actual total. And so I highlighted a couple boxes for you and just referenced them in my note there below the table to show, like, in the percentage of population with 1 dose, Marathon County is the lowest percentage, but they're the highest number of people. So they're sitting on opposites, you would think, when you're looking at that. So if you led with 1 versus the other, this is how people say that you can lie with statistics, right? Similarly, with the second column there, you see that Adams County, which is holding in this position in terms of overall population completed with the series, they're at the highest percentage of population complete, but also the lowest number of doses. So again, early on especially, it's really important to look at both of them so you get a good sense of what that percentage or the raw data is telling you. Also worth noting, Marathon County and Wood County are higher than many other counties in the area. One big reason for that is Marshfield Clinic and Aspirus. So not only are they the hubs for these major health systems, but Marshfield is a hub for the vaccine effort through the state. And so they also have just a greater percentage of employees who work in healthcare. Same deal with like Waupaca County has a high number of long-term care facility beds. I think they're the highest per capita in the state. So that's going to, they're going to get a lot of early vaccine administration through those populations. So there's lots of little details that help shed a little more light on what you're seeing play out numbers-wise. I found it really interesting to see the monthly totals over time. DHS actually breaks it down by week, and so you can see this on their website, but by month you can really see the ramp up in terms of supply, even though it's been a constrained or limited supply from the federal government. That continues to increase, which is good, but you see in December, in Portage County, we had 488 total doses administered, and then we jumped to 6,000, then to 9,000. And if we can anticipate, based on what we understand now, that this sort of 9,500, maybe 9,000 to 10,000 per month is roughly where the vaccine supply is now. There will be some shifts with that as some of the pharmacies move away from the long-term care facilities as they get through those populations. So the point being that the trend will be somewhat similar until we really see the manufacturers catch up and the federal government starts ramping up doses, which I think that they're going to start doing, in that May timeframe when everybody becomes eligible. Looking ahead, I thought that it made sense to just kind of give you a real rough outlook in terms of where are we now, what are we seeing in terms of if the trends hold. Ray mentioned it earlier that, the goal, it's tied to the question too, like, when is the public health emergency over? Like, when does the state say, okay, the pandemic's done? In terms of vaccine administration, a lot of the discussions hinge around that 70% or 80% vaccinated population. Now, that's a goal. No one knows how close you're going to get to 70, 80%, but that's a direction everybody's moving in. So if you take that assumption and bake it into our population, Ray also mentioned that children currently are not eligible, so that would be taken off the top of the population. And if we only got the same amount of doses that we got last month, it would take us roughly 3.5 months to work through that 80% of eligible people who remain, which today is roughly 32,000 folks. So 3.5 months would be your kind of, if everything held the same, would be the longest. We know that vaccine supply is going to increase. We know that that's going to enable things like drive-through clinics or just larger clinics, things like that. So I would anticipate that that's going to have a large impact in terms of overall coverage in the county. But of course, there's still, vaccine hesitancy out there. There's folks who aren't going to get vaccinated, and that's all well and good. But that's things to consider as well within the numbers as we're looking at them. So I didn't want to get too crazy in the weeds on it, but this is something that I can kind of report to you at your meetings or send you as correspondence on a weekly or monthly basis, so you get a sense of where's the county at. Because if you get a lot of phone calls like I do, this sort of thing can help give people some quick answers in terms of what's going on. If people have any questions about this, I'm happy to answer those as well.
We've got a few people at home. We've got Supervisor Moore.
I don't have a question. I just have a comment and something for us to really just think about. First off, I just want to say how great of a job our county health department has been doing. But like really this week, when one of the community organizations reached out and said there's this vulnerable population that hasn't been being reached, and that the county health department was able to work around, put resources, and make sure that those most vulnerable were being reached about the vaccination. But I think that, we've seen through this whole pandemic with COVID-19, how marginalized communities are impacted at a much higher rate. And I think this is a really good spot for us to really look at for the next time, I don't want to say next time around, but to have real policies and practices in place so that we're taking care of these health racial within our county, because it shouldn't have to wait until one of our community's partners point out that there's a bunch of people who weren't having access to the vaccination because they didn't speak English. Like we should have thought about those things already as a county. And so I just really want to put that at the forefront, that as this pandemic progresses and as we're seeing this rollout of vaccinations, we're starting all of these inequalities are really surfacing, and we should really think deeper on our policies and practices and what do we put in place to make sure that we have the best practices. And I'm saying we're doing a great job because I do work around the state and some other counties don't have this in place yet, or hasn't moved as fast as we have to make sure that the most vulnerable populations and those who aren't reachable are being reached. So I just want to put that on the table.
Yeah, thank you very much, Supervisor Moore. It's a good point, and if you've looked at the numbers too, you should realize that DHS is not allocating vaccines on a per capita basis. And so when you see a lot of percentages and numbers, you're inclined to say, well, what's the percentage of our population? DHS isn't looking at that portion of it as closely. It's a factor, but if you follow this rollout at all closely, you'll see that there's been a lot of discussions, definitely in Wisconsin, about ensuring that there's an equity in the allocation. And so that's one portion of the formula that DHS is using in terms of which areas are getting more doses or less doses based on certain impacts, based on known impacts of different populations around the state. For instance, a lot of the tribal health associations are getting 100% of the requests that they put in because they want to make sure that those individuals are getting through the process as quickly as possible. Similarly, and this was not talked about, but the elderly. So, a lot of the things that were put out all hinged on your ability to access the internet. Everything's done online. That was a huge challenge when a third of your elderly population doesn't use a computer. And so just so you all know, that was discussed internally quite a bit. And then Cindy Petrusky at the ADRC and others worked to get some call centers up, so to speak, to reach out to those individuals, because we generally know who they are and where they're at. It's just a matter of giving them a call, letting them know what the resources are, and then trying our best to facilitate them getting where they need to be. Part of the hiccup early on too, it's not a hiccup per se, but local vaccinators weren't always granted the ability to move the vaccine, especially because there's so many logistical concerns. You got to keep it so cold and all this other business. And so everybody was, we're down here in the Guilford Center. Ascension's in their cafeteria area. You know, Aspirus is doing it, everybody's staying where they're at, so people had to come to them. But it, you know, as we've moved through this, we've been able to say, let's figure out how to do the mobile component so that for populations like who we already reach out to on a mobile basis, like the Meals on Wheels and stuff, going around the county delivering meals to folks out there, we can see if anybody out there is interested in a vaccine and then have that mobile vaccine component. Part of those plans also get held up just by supply because we've had a steady list of people who are coming in. And so once we get more supply too, that will enable even more of these other options to get beyond some of the clinics that we're seeing. And then I'll just end by saying that also, anytime we have something that's really kind of crucial, like a testing update or a new testing announcement or a vaccine clinic or whatever it might be that is really crucial to get information out there, we always make sure that there's a Spanish or a Hmong component, and we have native speakers reviewing this to make sure the language makes sense, because sometimes there's different words or dialects that, you know, make sense or used more widely elsewhere. It doesn't necessarily guarantee that people who speak Spanish and Hmong are going to see that, but at least we're making the effort to make sure that we have those resources so that in the instances like Supervisor Mua's relating to, we have that body of resources to say, here you go, it's all in Hmong, it's all in Spanish, or in English, and then people can access that information and get where they need to go. But very, very good point. So thanks for talking about that.
Supervisor Zastro.
I did not have a question.
Thank you. If there's no other questions or comments? Nope. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, guys.
Members of the public who wish to address the county board on specific agenda items must register their requests at this time with such comments subject to reasonable control of the county board chair as set forth in Robert's Rules of Order. Anyone from the public? We've got a long agenda tonight, so I would ask that you make it short and pardon?
3 minutes or less, yeah.
Yes, and I'm going to hold everybody to a hard 3 minutes too. So please state your name.
Aline Kozlowski,
Which item?
15.
Okay, when I get to item 15, I'll call on you.
Yeah, if you guys can move it up, that'd be great.
No. Next.
Marla Schultz, also number 15.
Marla Schultz, number 15. Sir?
Steve Ellis, and item 15.
Steve Ellis.
I would also prefer to hear the discussion before I decide whether I have anything to say. So I don't know. So when you're planning to hear.
What is 15? That's fine. No, anyone else? Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Someone else on the line?
Yes.
State your name, please.
Becky Crescent,
Which item, Becky?
15.
15? Anyone else? Okay, thank you. Confirmation of county executive's appointment. Appointing Kaylin Tate to the Health and Human Service Board for the remainder of the 3-year term expiring April 18th, 2022 to replace Jim Clark. I'll take a motion. Motion by Supervisor Dubek, seconded by Supervisor Jankowski. Discussion.
Mr. Chair,
Supervisor Zastro.
I believe, at least in my notice, it says it's Catherine Tate,
What did I say?
Kalen or something of
Sorry.
that nature.
Sorry,
As
Catherine.
long as we're having to take a motion on it, we should have it accurate.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? All those in favor with aye? Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Confirmation of Portage County Emergency Fire Wardens for 2021. If there's no objections, I'm going to take these all at the same time. I see no objections. And I'll take a motion to approve. Motion by Supervisor Gussel, seconded by Supervisor Pataki. Discussion. All those in favor with aye? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Resolution number 7, resolution recognizing the heroic and exceptional efforts of the team of the Portage County Healthcare Center in their work to protect our most vulnerable population during COVID.
Resolution number 86, 2020-2022, submitted by the Healthcare Center Committee. This resolution recognizes the efforts and extends appreciation to the employees of the Healthcare Center for their exceptional work during COVID-19. This resolution could benefit from an amendment to correct in the last, therefore be it resolved, the third line from managing the serious hazardous of proving to the serious hazards of providing, as well as adding the county board date.
I'll take a motion to make those changes. Motion by Supervisor Neville, seconded by Supervisor Splinter on the amendment. If there's any further discussion on the amendment, all those in favor with aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Back to the original motion as amended. I'm sorry. I got that out of order, folks. I'll take a motion to put it on the floor. I'll take a motion to put it on the floor. Thank you. Motion by Supervisor Dodge, seconded by Supervisor Dubek. Do you want me to go back to the amendment? Dave, are you on here? Do you want me to go back to that amendment? I had it out of order. I didn't realize that we did not have an amendment to put it on the floor or a motion.
I think you just acknowledged it, so we've got a motion and a second now. I think we're okay.
Okay, thank you. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Number 8, Town of Lanark Comprehensive Plan Amendment and Portage County Zoning Ordinance Map Amendment, St. Patrick's Congregation Property.
Resolution number 87, 2020-2022, submitted by the Planning and Zoning Committee. This resolution approves a comprehensive plan amendment and zoning ordinance map amendment for St. Patrick's Congregation Property.
Motion by Supervisor Barry Jakowski, seconded by Supervisor Splinter. Discussion. All those in favor with aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Number 9, Town of Plover Comprehensive Plan Amendment and Portage County Zoning Ordinance Map Amendment.
Resolution number 88, 2020-2022, submitted by the Planning and Zoning Committee. This resolution approves a comprehensive plan amendment and zoning ordinance map amendment for the town of Plover.
Motion by Supervisor Rakowski, seconded by Supervisor Soik. Discussion. All those in favor with aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Number 10, authorizing a 2021 budget adjustment for cardiac heart monitors.
Resolution number 89, 2020-2022, submitted by the Public Safety, Emergency Management, and Finance Committees. This resolution approves a budget adjustment to purchase cardiac heart monitors, requires a 2/3 supermajority vote.
Motion by Supervisor Pataki, seconded by Supervisor Jankowski. Discussion. All those in favor with aye? Opposed? Motion carries. Number 11, authorization of exception to Portage County Ordinance 3.11.5.2, proceeding limited term employee assistant corp counsel LTE position for additional hours.
Resolution number 90, 2020, 2022, submitted by the Human Resources and Judicial General Government Committees. This resolution authorizes an exemption to Ordinance 3.11.5.2 for the Assistant Corp Counsel LTE position.
I'll take a motion, don't be shy. Motion by Supervisor Machakowski, seconded by Supervisor Maresi. Discussion. All those in favor with aye? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Number 12, establishing a trust fund account for Wisconsin Statute 5.21 transportation grant funds.
Resolution number 91, 2020, 2022, submitted by the Portage County Transportation Coordinating Committee. This resolution establishes a trust fund account for WISSTAT 8521 transportation grant funds.
Motion by Supervisor Laddick, seconded by Supervisor Dodge. Discussion. All those in favor with aye? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Number 13, authorizing updates to capital project 310-15-07 wetland mitigation development project.
Resolution number 92, 2020, 2022, submitted by the Finance Committee. This resolution approves and authorizes the updated wetland mitigation development project.
Motion by Supervisor Laddick, seconded by Supervisor Rakowski. Discussion. All those in favor with aye? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Number 14, resolution declaring official intent to reimburse expeditors of wetland mitigation development project from proceeds of borrowing.
Resolution number 93, 2020, 2022, submitted by the Finance Committee. This resolution approves intent to reimburse expenditures for the wetland mitigation project.
Motion by Supervisor Jakowski, seconded by Supervisor Dodge. Discussion. All those in favor with aye? Aye. Opposed? Opposed? Motion carries. Number 15, resolution recognizing Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day and asking administration to develop presentation on diversity training efforts.
Resolution number 94, 2020, 2022, submitted by the Diversity Affairs and Inclusiveness Committee. This resolution honors Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his legacy, and a request that the Diversity Affairs and Inclusive Committee support county administration and their work for equity and diversity.
I'm going to take a motion to put it on the floor before I call on the public so I don't forget this time. So, motion by Supervisor Maresi, seconded by Supervisor Gifford. The people from the public that would like to speak. First lady's name?
Aline.
What's that?
Aline.
Aline? Aline?
My name is Aline. I am a property owner and taxpayer here. This resolution, I am not against. I think Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a wonderful person, did a lot of good. I do want to bring up one word on this resolution. If you look under now therefore be it resolved, the word equity, I wanted to point out. I would like for that to be stricken. This is essentially socialism. It means that those who work hard for something and those who are lazy and do nothing both deserve the same reward. That is what I would like to point out. He was fighting for equal opportunity, not socialism. So that is my one and only point. I would like this to be on the minutes. Just kidding. Just kidding.
What's the next lady?
Marla.
Marla?
Hi, my name is Marla Schultz. I'm a resident of Stevens Point. I agree with everything that she just said. In addition, from globaldiversitypractice.com, basically it says, diversity in a nutshell is about empowering people by respecting and appreciating what makes them different in terms of age, gender, ethnic, thank you, religion, disability, sexual orientation, education, and national origin. And it allows for exploration of these differences in a safe, positive, and nurturing environment. It means understanding one another by surpassing simple tolerance to ensure people truly value their differences. This allows us to embrace and to celebrate the rich dimensions of diversity contained within each individual and place positive value on diversity. While I'm not opposed to people having the same opportunities to do things, my concern with part of this about valuing differences, my concern with the training is that it could force some people to use terms that go against their religious beliefs. And that.
Steve? Oh, you wanted to go later? Or wait and see? Okay.
Becky.
Becky? 3 minutes, please.
Okay, I was in the committee meetings where this went back and forth, and that title is not what was discussed. It was very strongly opinionated to take off the training part of this and to concentrate it on honoring Martin Luther King and not an excuse to pass diversity and inclusivity training. So I would like that discussed and possibly amended.
Okay. That's everybody we had from the public, except for Steve, who's holding his comments. Melissa? Supervisor Johnson, did you have a comment?
Yes, I do, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the opportunity. There are two things I wish to have stricken from this, and I appreciate, I thank you to Deputy Clerk Jans for making you aware of my earlier message to him about this. We need to strike, resolution should only say, resolution recognizing Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and the rest of that sentence under the reason should be stricken because it was not approved by the committee. And then also the last, now therefore be it resolved, should also be stricken. I will apologize to my colleagues that this ended up staying on. We had a difficult evening that evening, including a 35-minute delay because of technology, and thanks to Executive Holman for making everything come together. But in the end, those two items should be stricken from this, and I'd like to make a motion to amend the resolution to strike under the reason, having it simply say resolution recognizing Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and then the last, strike the last, now therefore be it resolved.
I have a motion for an amendment. Do I have a second? Supervisor Dubek on the amendment. If there's no further discussion. Supervisor Chai, you'd like to make a comment?
Yes, I'd like to make a comment. I understand that this didn't pass committee. I just wanted to put out there for everybody that we as a as a governing board, we can no longer keep passing resolutions that empty resolutions is what I call them, or placeholders. It is great to pass resolutions in honor of, but there needs to be change that comes along with resolutions. This is by taking out trainings or anything that actually like furthers our analysis and furthers our education and diversity, or in learning about different communities that are within the county. This is performative allyship. And performative allyship actually causes more harm to marginalized communities. We've had performative allyship for too many years, and we cannot continue to have performative allyship.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second on the amendment. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor with the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Back to the original resolution as amended. Supervisor Splinter.
Again, I think the last time when this came up, I tried to be logical. I'm not. I'm just trying to throw something out here where it says resolution recognizing Dr. Martin Luther King Day and asking administration to develop a presentation on diversity training efforts. I don't get the point of the resolution from the committee when Martin Luther King Day is already a nationally recognized holiday. One, and then asking the administration to develop a presentation on diversity. If they're asking the HR,
Where are you seeing that in here now?
on the agenda?
Yes, but where you're asking that for them to, because that's being stricken in the title. Okay.
Down at the bottom, it says, request that the Diversity Affairs and Inclusivity Committee support. It doesn't say ask, support county administration in this work to the extent possible and where requested. And that's almost a given. They would always, if
She's asking for that to be stricken as well, in the last therefore be it
right
resolved, she's removing it. That's what we just approved. So that's no longer in there, and neither is it in the title.
On the last line. Okay.
It's gone.
Okay.
We just did that.
And we can leave the Martin Luther King in there. But
Yes.
I don't see the logic in it, being a national holiday already. It's like saying, well, when Christmas comes, we're gonna celebrate the birth of Christ, you know? Well, that's been done already, quite a few years already, so. Anyway, I'm just pointing out I'm not against or for anything. I'm just saying, where's the logic? What do they want to do?
Supervisor Morassi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to add that when the committee discussed this and agreed to remove the training component, they did agree to work in conjunction with the HR committee to create a training component. And I believe that it is the will of the committee, and I think even our HR director agreed that she would very much appreciate being part of that discussion. So, taking that out of there, it should have been done. I don't know how this got left in there, either from staff or from the committee or from the meeting minutes not being recorded correctly. I'm not really sure how this got left in here again. It's disappointing to me as well. It doesn't look good. It doesn't look like there's no due diligence. And I'm disappointed in that, but this committee will be working with the HR committee, of which Supervisor Johnson and I do both sit on, and we'll be having a discussion with them about this, because we do believe it's important to have all the buy-in from all the committees to create a unified effort and to show the real value that training will have for our community. It's not about forcing anything down anybody's throats, as I've heard in other committees from people from the public coming in and saying that. It's about evaluating our policy. It's about looking at how we approach county government as a group of electeds, and how we can best serve people in our community. So this is an easy lift to our county board. to simply honor this and honor Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Having discussion as to why we shouldn't, to me is absolutely preposterous. And I'm embarrassed to have to say this again. So we need to move this forward quickly tonight, and then we need to do the work, the heavy, deep lifting in the HR committee and the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, and put the money behind it from the Finance Committee to make this work happen. It is essential to the livelihoods of marginalized communities in central Wisconsin. Let's move this forward tonight. Thank you.
Supervisor Hano. Make sure you unmute yourself, Joan.
Okay, thank you, Chair Haga. The Wisconsin Counties Association has 4 webinars on diversity, equity, and inclusivity. I have taken 3 of the 4. I went into those seminars thinking, I've heard it all. I've heard it all. I get, the seminars were excellent. The presenters that they put together for those 4 webinars approached this from a county perspective, from a systemic racism perspective. They were powerful speakers. They're in the field. They know what they're talking about. Kenosha County was one of the counties that's featured, La Crosse County, and what counties are doing. If you go to the Wisconsin County Association website and you go to their events and you go to past events, you can access those webinars. I would highly, highly recommend them to anybody, especially those of us who think that we've got it. So that's it.
Supervisor Bob Gifford.
Yeah, I just want to comment on the whole topic, I guess. Most of my worldview was formed being in a non-governmental institution, which was the labor unions. And my teachers and mentors in that were the militant black workers in the UAW in Detroit, and then the members who I worked for when I was on staff in Philadelphia, South Jersey, the black and Puerto Rican workers who ran those union locals kept reminding me, you work for us. And they taught me a lot of lessons. That union, the electrical, the UE, was probably exceptional among the other unions, where you didn't have to quite fight so hard to get to a position of authority or power. But I think on the whole, our labor unions failed in our mission in that we didn't bring along the rest of the workforce with us. We didn't bring the lowest paid people from predominantly what we call now Black, Indigenous, people of color communities, right? And because we failed in that, because there's such a tiny proportion of workers now organized, we did not fulfill the mission of diversity and inclusion. And consequently, we have this horrendous problem with chronically low wages for about 40% of our working people, right? So that's a non-governmental institution, but I think had we gone down the path of diversity and inclusion and bring people along and elevate the people, we would be on a better path toward a sustainable society, because I do not believe that the kind of society that has rampant inequality is sustainable. It's internally unstable. So I think, governmental institutions such as our county, non-governmental institutions, what we call civil society groups, all need to work on this mega issue. Thank you.
I just want to remind everybody we have before us is a resolution to support Martin Luther King Day. I don't want to sit here and debate about the diversity and the rest of it. We're getting off topic. So Supervisor Matt Jakowski?
I have nothing.
Nothing? Anybody else at home? Supervisor Syke?
I'd like to look at the word of unanimous. I'd like to see maybe that stricken. And
where is it?
In the last, whereas Portage County has made a commitment to diversity and inclusiveness and belonging with the unanimous vote to create. We just heard the word unanimous earlier today to maybe not be used. I don't know if this is the right time for that or not, but it seems like we had a discussion or a clinic on it earlier. I'd like to see that gone and just the vote created. And I'd like a little conversation on equity, being that the public had brought it up. Again, I'm in complete support of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., but I'd like a little discussion on the word equity and its meaning before I would vote.
Supervisor Martinson, do you have your hand up or are you just frozen time?
Just frozen time.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Syke, are you making that in a motion? I can't do anything with it, so.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to strike the word unanimous.
Take them one at a time then.
Okay.
I've got a motion to amend it and strike unanimous. Do I have a second? Motion seconded by Supervisor Splinter. We're gonna have to probably take a roll call on this one. Are you ready for that?
Absolutely.
I'm going to just state that they had talked about it briefly in the earlier conversations, but in fact, this was the diversity and inclusive, to my recollection, was voted unanimous, or I will say this, everybody that was in attendance voted yes for that, whether you call it unanimous or whatever other terms you use. I believe that that is a true statement that's in this document. So Supervisor Neville, I'd ask everybody to keep it short. We're running long tonight, folks, with the presentations and other things. Supervisor Neville.
If everyone at the meeting was unanimously voted for this, then I'll
was the county board.
Withdraw my second.
Withdraw your second.
Based on, I didn't know what the unanimous meant.
Yes.
Sorry.
So back to Supervisor Syke's original motion to amend unanimous. Do I have a second? Do I have a second? Do I have a second? Fails for a lack of a second. You had another amendment.
I would like to make a motion for clarification on the word equity.
Who can help me with this? Supervisor Johnson, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I guess I'm looking for some assistance, please.
Sure. We can think of equity as, fairness in the way people are treated, and the way we provide opportunity. Equity, if you think about equal opportunity, everybody has equal opportunity to stand at a fence to look at a baseball game. However, equity means that everybody can see over the fence. Not everybody might be able to see over the fence. So equity is about that fairness principle. It's not about socialism. It's not about giving things away. It's about being fair. Pretty simple.
Thank you. Supervisor Ande.
Mr. Chairman, point of inquiry.
that word equity appears now therefore be it resolved, and that sentence has been scratched by the original motion. So does it still apply?
No.
No, that one hasn't been.
No, he's talking in there's only one there for be it resolved. There was two. The bottom one is the one that was stricken. So therefore that the Portage County Board of Supervisors honors Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his legacy of nonviolent activism in that section right there. So, okay. Supervisor Gifford.
Yeah, just for now, Webster Dictionary, equity, A, justice according to natural law or right, specifically freedom from bias or favoritism. That's equity. There's nothing in there about social ownership of industry or anything like that.
Supervisor Moresi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can help provide some clarification on equality versus equity as well. Some of the definitions that groups that I've been working with define equality as equal sharing and division, keeping everyone at the same level. It gives the same things to all people regardless of their need. Equity, in contrast, is the fair treatment, access, advancement, and opportunity for all people. It strives to identify and eliminate barriers that prevent the full participation of some groups or individuals. Promoting equity requires an understanding of the cause of outcome disparities within our society. I think what we all want equality, but we all need equity. Okay. I don't know how much further we can go with that. It seems very clear in my mind, just hearing those definitions as I said them again. Thank you.
So Supervisor Syke, where are we at with this?
I like Supervisor Gifford's definition of the word, and I would like to see that definition assigned. I did not like Supervisor Moresi's elongated definition.
So what are you saying? Are you making an amendment to something here?
I would like the motion to reflect Supervisor Gifford's.
Please state it.
Definition of equity, if he could please reread those off his Webster dictionary.
Oh. Now I gotta look it back up again, sorry.
I thought he knew that by heart.
So did I was impressed.
Should we just go with Merriam-Webster's definition?
Mr. Chair, I have a point of clarification.
Okay, it is.
Go ahead, Bob.
So I don't mean to defeat Vinnie's concept either. I just think we should agree on the meaning of words, that's all. Justice according to natural law or right, specifically freedom from bias or favoritism. And I got this off Merriam-Webster.com.
So I guess what I'm trying to understand is that you like Mr. Gifford's definition better than Mr. Moresi's. It's still the same word. Are we leaving it in, or are you making a motion to remove it and replace it with something else? So I guess that's what I'm looking for, is if we're going to have an amendment, let's have it.
I'd like to make a motion to remove it.
Okay, we have a motion to remove equity.
Yes.
Do I have a second?
No.
Motion by Supervisor Gussel. We have a motion and a second to remove equity.
I have a point of discussion, Mr. Chair, if I may.
And Supervisor Moresi.
Thank you very much. The Diversity Inclusion Committee is actively making definitions or seeking out definitions and discussing them at their meetings. And I believe equity has been on the table for discussion. And I'm not exactly sure what the definition is that they use. Perhaps Supervisor Johnson could help me with that. But I think if we're going to decide on a definition, then we should utilize the due diligence of the committee. And what they have decided is the definition that they would like to use and forward on to the county board. And if I remember correctly, I'm at those meetings, and so is Mr. Soik. So this has actually already been covered in multiple meetings at the Diversity Inclusion Committee. So I just wanted to point that out there.
Mr. Chair, to Supervisor Moressi's point of making up definitions is exactly why this is so important that we have a standard place to get our definitions. And I believe, the way I was taught in school, that the dictionary is probably the best place to get them, as Mr. Supervisor Gifford has already stated. I brought this up a couple months ago in front of this body about this committee and them making up definitions as they go along. You cannot change. Words have meaning. We have to go with the meaning of the words. And if we are not going to go with those meanings, then we cannot use them, which is why we need to strike this.
Supervisor Gussel.
We are using words here that we definitely don't have a definite definition for, and they can be construed to be used in a number of different ways. And you're asking for trouble with what you're doing. This is to be discussed at a different time. Everybody's going to come up with their own definition. You don't need that.
Supervisor Moore and then Supervisor Martinson.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think the comment I'm about to make, many of you are not going to sit comfortably with, but I think that it's okay for you all to not be comfortable with the comment that I'm about to make. The dictionary was written by white men. The dictionary and the definitions in there were written by a group that have colonized and have oppressed communities for a long time. Marginalized communities, folks who were appointed to the Diversity Affairs Committee, they should have the right to write and define what, and marginalized communities have the right to define what equity means. And as a group of a body of government who we all have privileges and we all have power, it is not up to us to define and to write what that means and to say we are going to push on that definition of this word from a dictionary onto the people in our constituencies. This is absolutely not right.
Supervisor Martinson.
I withdraw. I can't follow that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Johnson.
Thank you. Yeah, you know what? Words do matter. They're very important. There's no question about that. But if we're going to define every word that we use, we're going to have to book even longer periods of time for which we will meet. For instance, define purple. We all have sort of a different understanding of what that means. In the resolution, there are words like assassinated. That could take on a number of different connotations: murdered, killed, shot down. If we're going to define every single word and parse out that we don't understand what they mean, what does civil rights mean? What does inclusive mean? What does being a private citizen mean? All of we use words, our language is how we communicate it. What took us from being primitive gatherer hunters to being hopefully a more advanced civilization. Words, spoken words and the written word. However, we all have different context with which we receive these things. And all of that context comes from the experiences of our lives, the people we know, the places we've traveled to, the things we've learned. If we're going to define every single word, I think we're in a world of hurt. And it's somewhat meaningless to define every single word in a resolution. Because if we're going to define this word, I think we then should define all words used in resolutions so that everybody knows exactly what we mean. What does it mean to pass a resolution on comprehensive plan amendment? Might be a bit different from what I think, from what someone else thinks. What does it mean to protect people? These are all things that are in the realm of subjectivity. Certainly there is an objective string through it, but this seems as though we're parsing out something in an effort to undermine the entirety of the thought. So thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Supervisor Zastro.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not completely clear of where this stands, but I'm willing to call the question.
Good idea.
I believe we have a motion and a second on the floor to remove equity, correct?
Correct.
So I have a funny feeling it's going to be a split, so we're going to probably end up just going ahead and doing a roll call, so be patient. When the clerk is ready, call the roll.
What we're voting on to remove.
We're voting on removing the word equity. Correct, Supervisor Slake?
Yes.
Supervisor Mula.
Supervisor Mula, how do you vote on removing the word equity as an amendment?
I said no.
Thank you.
Supervisor Hagel.
No.
Mr. Chairman,
Keep going.
Supervisor Morrow.
Supervisor Morrow, is your mic on?
Yeah, it should be.
Or take your mask off so you can.
Supervisor Ande.
No.
Supervisor Pataki.
no.
Supervisor Dubek.
No.
Supervisor Robbie.
No.
Supervisor Johnson.
No.
Supervisor Gussel.
Yes.
Supervisor Reeser.
No.
Supervisor Splinter.
Aye.
Supervisor Dodge.
No.
Supervisor Matt Jakowski.
No.
Supervisor Don Jankowski.
No.
Supervisor Barry Jakowski.
No.
Supervisor Soik.
Yes.
Supervisor Gifford.
No for me.
Supervisor Laddick.
Where'd he go?
He's gone.
Probably to breakfast.
Supervisor Laddick, are you still on? His battery probably ran out.
Supervisor
Looks like
Neville.
he's gone.
No.
Supervisor Rakowski.
No.
Supervisor Zastro.
No.
Supervisor Martinson.
No.
Supervisor Moresi.
No.
Supervisor Honnell.
No.
$19 to 4, that fails.
Amendment fails. Back to the original resolution as amended. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor with aye?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Number 16, amending Portage County Ordinance Chapter 3 resulting in the process for Portage County membership in the North Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission.
Resolution number 95, 2020, 2022, submitted by the Executive Operations Committee. This resolution amends Chapter 3 and creates a process for membership in the North Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission.
Motion by Supervisor Gifford, seconded by Supervisor Rakowski. Discussion. Supervisor Moresi, did you have your hand up for a discussion? No? Okay. If there's no discussion, all those in favor with aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Number 17, amending Portage County Ordinance Section 3.1.45 entitled Adoption of Robert's Rules of Order to update formatting, adopt the current edition of Robert's Rules of Order and establishing procedures for correcting scrivener's errors in the minutes, resolutions, and ordinances.
Resolution number 96, 2020, 2022, submitted by the Executive Operations Committee. This resolution amends Chapter 3 to adopt the current version of Robert's Rules of Order and establishes a procedure for correcting scrivener's errors. This resolution could benefit from minor amendments to capitalize newly revised throughout and to insert prior to its publication in the ordinance language, number 5, on the third line after resolution or ordinance.
Do you have a technical? Do you have a technical?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'd make a motion to approve with changes as presented by Chief Deputy County Clerk Jens.
I have a motion for amendment on the resolution, as well as a second by Supervisor Barry Jakowski. It was made by Matt Jakowski. And can you please restate that for the body?
Sure. It'll be capitalizing newly revised everywhere in the ordinance. It's part of the title. And then in the ordinance language, insert and prior to its publication on the third line of 5 after resolution or ordinance.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for that technical amendment, and it's kind of ironic that it's on this agenda, so hopefully it's the last time we deal with it. All those in favor with the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Amendment carries. Back to the original resolution as amended. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor with aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I'll take a motion to adjourn. Motion by Supervisor Barry Jakowski, seconded by Supervisor Dodge. All those in favor, aye? Aye. We're adjourned.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.